Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. And it's a very special episode of Story Time because it's another episode of Story Beats, where I take one of the official story decks as created by Wizards of the Coast and put it through its paces on Magic Arena. Today we have Gruff and Tuff, a green, black, and blue deck that shows off the fighting strength of the three Billy Goats Gruff. Here is the official description. 1, 2, and brother 3, not afraid of a troll are thee. Dance along the beanstalks with the satyrs of the Tanglespan as they fight trolls and explore the wilds. This is a deck that likes to put a lot of creatures on the board and make them fight. With cards like Faun's Bane Troll and Gruff Triplets, you can use the new roll mechanic and beefy tokens to make the board your fighting pit. The notable cards here are Tanglespan Lookout, Faun's Bane Troll, and Gruff Triplets. The idea being that we are going to bravely enter the wilds and stomp on anything that gets in our way. With that in mind, here's the rest of the deck list. In addition to the powerhouse that is the Gruff Triplets, we've also got big creatures like Beanstalk Worm in here, which can also use its adventure to help ramp us, which is going to be very helpful. Root Rider Faun and Return from the Wilds can also provide us with extra early mana, which lets us play our massive threats, and then we've got a handful of fight spells in here which turn our creatures into our removal. We will probably struggle against a dedicated controlled deck, but if they are killing our creatures and not exiling them, we might be able to squeak by with Not Dead After All, which is really fun to cast on our Gruff Triplets if we can get away with it. Overall, this deck seems pretty sweet. It is 3 colors, which has historically been hit or miss for this series, and a lot of our rares are tied up in our lands, but we do have some fixing and some ramping, which does take some of the pressure off that 3-color spread. So, can the 3 Billy Goats Gruff beat up the trolls that are waiting for them in the Wilds of Eldraine? Let's find out in today's Story Beats. Okay, here we go. First game with Gruff and Tuff. We only have 2 lands, but if we can hit a third, we get to ramp or we get to adventure. We've got a lot of options here. This is a risky keep, but sometimes you gotta roll those dice, you know? All right, opponent opens on a swamp, and we did find another land, so this was the smartest keep I've ever made, although we are playing against Gandalf, so anything can still happen. Opponent Barrow Naughty, so I'm seeing blue-black fairies here, most likely. I think we're going to use this opportunity to plant some beans with our Beanstalk Worm here, get an extra land down. And now, so next turn we have the option of Tanglespan Lookout or Return from the Wilds to find another land. Opponent attacks with their Barrow Naughty, and did they have a third land or a second fairy? They have Picklock Prankster. Okay, that's a cool one. Mills 4 cards, and then they get an instant sorcery or fairy back from among those milled, but it looks like they took another Barrow Naughty. Okay, but they are still missing lands. We, in the meantime, hit our 4th. And so now I think we're going to use this opportunity to continue ramping. We will search our library for another land. And do I want food here or a human token? I think the food is actually going to be more useful. And I think I want more green since our hand is entirely green at this point. Alright, Barrow Naughty number 2 comes in. They now both have lifelink because these guys care about controlling another fairy. But our Beanstalk Worm has reach, and if they don't have any removal, then this is a pretty tough wall for them to get through. So, opponent does have a third land. It's another island. But will that be enough to deal with the worm? And even if they kill this one, we've got another waiting in the wings, so Okay, opponent uses Vantress Transmuter. Wasn't expecting that in a fairy deck, but if it works, it works. Alright, we find yet another land. So now we have enough to play this worm, and then we can even use Graceful Takedown to start knocking out some of these fairies. Target any number of enchanted creatures you control, sure, and up to one other creature, and I think we want to knock out a Baron Knight. Get them off that life gain. Not going to attack there. This guy still has a reach, even though he's down to a 1/1, so we could still block the Fairy Dream Thief if we need to. Ooh, opponent going all in on the curse tech. I like it. So both of our Beanstalk Worms are diminished. But like I said, it's okay. These can still block the smaller fairies, and if they die, then whatever. This Restless Cottage down here is going to probably start doing some work for us. I think I like trading off one of these worms with the Dream Thief. Not really any point blocking the Baronauti. Alright. Alright, we pick up Troublemaker Oof, I believe is how you pronounce that. So he's a 2/2 for 2 with Bargain. When he enters the battlefield, if it was bargained, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So we could get rid of this curse, or we could destroy the duel. I kind of like getting rid of this curse, actually. We're going to give up that food token that we oh so cleverly made 3 turns ago. And now we get to remove that, although I'm sure they've got other ways to curse us again. Wow, opponent's gonna fire off a fairy fencing to kill our worm in response. That's all right. Okay, so what do we do with the rest of our mana? We could animate this cottage. Could just play a Tanglespan Lookout. I think I want to get in with this cottage here while I've got the opportunity. It does let us eat something out of their graveyard. I don't really know. Oh, well, yeah, we can get rid of this Fairy Dream Thief, which they could otherwise exile to draw a card. So at least we close that door for them for the future. All right, they scry 2 to the top off of the Saga. Not really a great sign when the opponent keeps both of their cards. And then they just play the 3/4 Transmuter. Okay. So it's not another fairy, so their Baronauti doesn't pick up lifelink. Alright, so at this point, we can play our Tanglespan. Do we want to attack with our 4/4? They would probably double block it and kill it. And we would only get to kill one of their things in exchange, which doesn't seem great. So instead, we will... I want to get more lands out of the deck just to keep thinning it out. I guess I do. Maybe an extra swamp here, since that's the color we have the least amount of. And no attacks. So now we've got plenty of mana. We just need to draw our Gruff Triplets, or our Troll, or something that makes use of all this land. Opponent's going to tap out for Into the Fey Court, a sorcery that draws them more cards and makes a non-blocking fairy token. But it is another fairy, so now they've got lifelink back on their Baronauti. And we don't have anyone with reach. Alright. We pick up another Oof. And he doesn't really help us a whole lot. Alright, well, I guess since we don't have a whole lot else to do, maybe this is a chance to get in with the cottage. Again, I don't really know if there's anything in here that we desperately need to keep them away from, but just in case they have a way to pick up some spells out of their own graveyard. Yeah, so I think we get rid of the transmuter here. Is it worth just slamming this guy? I think we're going to keep him in case they have more curses in our future. We might take a bite of food, though, just to keep our health up. Opponent's fairies are, you know, not being super aggressive here, so we've got time. We just need to draw something useful. All right, they're going to feed the cauldron on our Tanglespan. That's a shame. We didn't get to draw any cards off of him. We didn't have any auras entering the battlefield. Opponent carefully considering their next move. And it's going to be a bargained copy of Back for Seconds. Interesting. So that's going to get them 2 creatures back, 1 onto the field, 1 into their hand. They put Transmuter in their hand and another Naughty on the field. Alright, so we're going to eat one of these foods. And then take 2 damage, and they're going to gain 1 off of lifelink. We find a graceful takedown. So unfortunately, our little oof here can't kill either of these naughties. We could kill just the lone fairy, but I don't see much point in doing that. But I'm going to attack, because if they block, then we will be able to kill the naughty. They don't fall for it, though. That's fine. Alright, I think I'm just going to hold both of these still. Really hoping to draw something bigger. Opponent, Chancellor of Tales. So, they've got some adventures coming. Alright, we are getting swarmed here by these flyers. We definitely need to draw something good. No more lands, please, deck. Alright. Draw step. What did I just say about no more lands? We had such a good opening, too. We had, like, creatures, we had ramp, they just dealt with everything, and they only had, like, 3 lands. Well, I guess when your deck is just a bunch of cheap fairies, you can get by like that, but we need to draw something, like, big and fast. Alright, so they play Dream Spoilers. Whenever they cast a spell during our turn, they get to give something -1/-1. Alright. Well, unfortunately, we can't block any of this. I don't really want to eat this last bit of food. I might need to bargain with it. Not dead after all. Doesn't help us here either. Alright, well. I guess we're gonna try to kill their 2/2 at the very least. Unfortunately, if they have anything they can play right now, this changes the math. Okay, they don't have any instance. And, do we attack here into their 1/3? I mean, I guess we do, right? It's a free roll. They might be too scared to block. Hey, look at that. Free 2 points of damage. Alright, and the next turn we're taking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at least. These could be pumped up to be bigger. We do got some pocket food if we really, really need it. Alright, they didn't spend their mana to pump up their Baronauties. So, are they sitting on counterspells? Another oof. Okay, well, I think that's gonna do it for this game. But But we'll just play it out here. We've seen opponents make mistakes in the past. Opponent with 4 cards in hand. Any of them counter spells, board wipes, removal? I don't really know. Doesn't really matter. Even if we eat this, we go up to 7. And they've got 7 in the air here. Easy if they want it. Come on, opponent. All you gotta do is attack. And pump up your Baronaughty. At least one of them. Okay, there we go. They found it. Good game, good game. We didn't quite get there with our Gruff and Tuff in game 1, but let's see if we can pull it together for game 2. Okay, Gruff and Tuff at it again, and just like last time, we only have 2 lands in our opening hand, and then not even a lot to do if we get to 3, so I think we're mulliganing here. This is a little better. I guess we have to ditch Not Dead after all. And so we're probably going to play Cottage into one of the other lands, into the Root Rider Faun. Oof. Alright. Opponent opening with a Jungle Hollow, so perhaps they're on a budget build, or they just want to get all their colors in, or maybe they got some life gain strategy here. Dead Butler, so graveyard. And they lose a Crawling Infestation and 2 more lands. Interesting. Alright. Well, I think we just play our Faun here. So she's a 1/3 that can tap for a green, or 1 and a tap gets us one of our other colors if we desperately need it. Obviously not what we want to be doing with her, but it's nice to have that option. Alright. So we've picked up a Troublemaker. An opponent unlikely to have a lot of enchantments that we need to worry about, so I think we'll just get him down as a 2/2 for now. Might even use Graceful Takedown to knock out this Reclusive Taxidermist before it gets any bigger, because once it becomes a 4/4, it's a lot harder to deal with. Alright, and they just pass back. So, yeah, I mean, I guess this is as good of a time as any. We don't have any enchanted creatures. I think we'll just try to use the Oof to kill this Taxidermist. And if this works, we'll be able to attack, and maybe they'll block with the Butler, maybe not. Alright. And looks like we're just getting in for 2 damage here. Okay. So the cool part is we've got multiple lands that we can start animating, so even though we are flooding out a bit, we're not in real trouble. So they're going to play Gravelighter. So I think we are going to Not Dead after all our little Oof here. And then we can sacrifice it, and it will come back with a Wicked Roll on it. Opponent, meanwhile, uses their Butler to put their Taxidermist back in hand. Okay. Do we have enough to animate the Vine Stalk? We need 5 to do that. And we do. Or is it better to animate the Cottage? Because when it attacks, we get to exile something from our opponent's graveyard, and we want to keep that as small as possible since they've got graveyard synergies and stuff going on here. So each attack with this Restless Cottage is going to be really important. I mean, right now they just have lands in there, but if they start to put creatures in there or anything... Fell Stinger, interesting. So this guy comes in and gets to exploit, and then they sacrifice their own Gravelighter to draw 2 more cards and lose 2 life. And they got the window there for Gloomshrieker to bring back their Gravelighter. Alright, alright. So they still don't actually have any creatures in the graveyard, and they now have a death-touching Fell Stinger. So we could attack with one of the cottages. They'd probably just block it with the Stinger. Or we could just attack with our oof here. And so I'm not sure what they're going to do. If they want to trade the Stinger off, probably not Gloom Shrieker, because when it dies, it gets exiled. Okay, they're going to lose one from the Wicked roll. We'll put down an extra faun here for insurance. And next turn, I would love to attack with the cottage and get that out of their graveyard. All right, Doomed Dissenter. Obviously, they're going to follow that up with the Gravelighter. Sack their own Dissenter, turn it into a 2/2 zombie token, which is fine. We have to give up something, so we'll just lose one of our fawns. Alright, opponent's board is getting kind of wide, but it's not very big yet. And they have a menacing Gloom Shrieker, so that's going to slip by us, but... Although I guess we could have animated the... Oh no, we wouldn't have had enough colors. We would have had to tap the faun, and then because of Menace, that wouldn't have worked. Alright, so do we return from the wilds here, get a land? We'll make a creature, and we'll just go find maybe another swamp. Now I want to animate my cottage. Ooh, opponent was waiting with Infernal Grasp. That's unfortunate, but at least we get that out of their hand before we play a Beanstalk Worm or something. And we do have another cottage, so... Alright, so this looks to be 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 damage. And of course, the top deck is another land. Okay, well, we can just animate the cottage, as long as this isn't another removal spell. We can just attack with that. We'll get rid of Fell Stinger, I guess. Hit them for 4. We got some blockers, we got some food, so we're not in terrible shape. Okay. Opponent's going to go in with just the flyer, probably. Yep, can't really do anything about that. I think on this end step we will eat some food just to stay at a nice healthy life total. We pick up Tanglespan Lookout, which doesn't do a whole lot for us here. So opponent with 2 cards. Man, I guess we just keep trying to get in with this cottage, right? At the very least, we get to keep their graveyard in check. And they double block, but neither of these go to the graveyard. And then I guess we just play the Lookout for value. And hopefully next turn, maybe we draw like the Troll or something that makes an aura. But even without it, we still have the Vinestalk. Although now opponent has a 6/6, which drains us for a bit. I don't know, I think we're still in okay shape because the Vinestalk can become a 5/5. And we can turn another creature into a 3/3. So we can shrink their Dreadhorde. It's always a land. When I need something good, it's always a land. So let's try this. Make a 5/5. Attack with the 2 of these. Oh, I shouldn't have done that because I guess they're going to be able to block it with their Dreadhorde. Alright, so they double block our land again. Desperate to get us off of these things. Unfortunately, that does drain us a little bit, and oof, they now have enough creatures. Despite all of our exiling, they still hit that threshold, and now they're gonna Gloom Shrieker probably to get back that Dreadhorde, right? Oh man, we were so close again, and then we just hit so many lands. We're going to eat a food in response so we don't die to the triggers here. Okay, Gruff Triplets. Probably the best thing we could have drawn there. Gives us a lot of attackers. And so now we can either just go around them, or if we draw a way to buff one of these guys up, they're just making a ton of, well, not a ton, a couple of decayed zombies they can't block. So right now they've got 1, 2, 3, 4 blockers. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 attackers. So if they block all the big stuff, they take 2. Pick up Beanstalk Worm. So I think we actually suicide in one of these tokens. So when it dies, we get to put counters on both of the other tokens. So now next turn with these tramplers, we might be able to get there. Opponent gives us the oops. Does that mean that they didn't intend to block, or they shouldn't have blocked? They didn't think about the outcome for blocking. All right. So they swing all out. We just need to weather 10 damage here. So I think if we block like that, we're just going to take triggers from the Dreadhound when stuff dies. But our board survives most of this. It's just a matter of our life total not changing. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Another trigger off of that. We're down to 6. Can they kill us? Or did the Gruff Triplets show up just in time? Opponent with a nice, and they concede. All right, Gruff and Tuff. We got there on game 2. Let's see if we can do one more. Round 3. Here we go. All right, final match with Gruff and Tuff. We've got all 3 colors. We've got 2-drop, 3-drop, plant beans. I feel great about this. Let's see if it works. Opening with our forest so that we can play the rest of our stuff. Although I don't mind having a not dead after all for later. Opponent has a forest of their own. Okay. Not doing anything with it. So we will take this opportunity to plant our beans. And now next turn we could just Tangle Span Lookout. Yeah, I guess that's what it's going to be. We didn't find a 4th land, unfortunately, so it might be a while before these Beanstalk Worms get to do anything. Opponent on green and white. Drogskull Infantry, a 2/2 for 2 with Disturb. Becomes an aura that gives a creature +2/+2. So we got like a green and white auras thing happening here. Kind of don't need 3 not deads. Is it worth playing this guy or waiting until we need to get rid of an enchantment? I guess that's the better play, right? And I'm going to say no attack here, actually. They wouldn't be able to block, but my fear is that they would just take the 2, then slap an aura on this guy and hit us for a lot more. I'd rather keep the blocker because we can not dead after all on that. Or we can just keep staring each other down and not doing anything. All right. Return from the Wilds. I guess that's worth doing here. We'll get a chump blocker and we'll get a land. What color do I want it to be, though? I guess green. All right, so this Botanical Brawler is a little scary. It's a 2/2 with trample right now. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on another permanent you control, if it's the first time counters have been put on it this turn, put a 1/1 counter on the brawler. So, combo's great with Ozolith, I was just about to say. Oh dear. Okay, fortunately that's a great thing to hit with our Troublemaker Oof, because he can exile artifacts or enchantments. We'll just have to give up our human token, which I'm totally fine with. An opponent is bushwhacking to find a basic land, put it into their hand. I would much rather have them do that than bushwhack to kill somebody, so fine by me. Okay. We find a 5th land. So do we go Beanstalk Worm here? I don't think so. I want to get Ozolith gone before it gets a chance to put counters on anybody. So we'll get that out of here. And do we attack with Tangle Span? I still don't think so. I like the 2/3 against the 2/2s. It kind of lulls our opponent into, again, throwing some auras down or something, and we can maybe get a good block on them. Because they're certainly not expecting us to be holding 3 not deads after all. And if they do nothing, then next turn we just get a Beanstalk Worm, which will be bigger than anything they've got. Alright, they played Fairgrounds Trumpeter. At the beginning of each end step, if a 1/1 counter was put on a permanent under your control this turn, put a 1/1 counter on the Trumpeter. But so far, no counters. And they pass. Pick up another land. Okay. So that actually works because that gives us enough to play this worm and keep a black up for not dead after all. And I guess at this point, since they haven't taken the bait yet, we'll see if they take 2. Okay. Alright, so all we gotta worry about now is, since they're a white deck, if they have exile-based removal rather than killing our stuff, if they're gonna Ossification or Borrowed Time, Seal from Existence. There's a bunch of stuff that I don't want to see them play here. Fortunately, they're just doing counters through a Juniper Order Root Weaver that has been kicked. And they choose to put the +1/+1 counter on the Brawler, but the Brawler only gets a counter if it's sees a counter get put on something else. So if they had put a counter on literally anything else, they would have gotten 2 counters out of it. So instead they just fight our Lookout. We will not dead after all, so it comes back with an aura. The Lookout sees the aura, so it draws us a card. Pretty happy with that exchange. And then the Fairgrounds Trumpeter gets a counter because it saw a counter. Okay. Okay. So we could just attack with this worm. They take 5, so I am good playing another worm here. And again, keeping our black up for the not deads. Opponent with a tapped land and a Faithbound Judge. That's one I don't see very often. So it's a 4/4 flyer defender. At the beginning of their upkeep, if it has 2 or fewer judgment counters on it, put a judgment counter on it. And then when it has 3 or more, it can attack. So it's going to take a few turns to like wake up. But even then, it can't get past our Beanstalk Worms, right? I think we just send those worms in, and again, if they block and kill either, alright, blocks are set. We will not dead this Beanstalk Worm. He gets to come back. He's wicked. That's an aura. Cool. And I guess we've got enough to play out the rest of our hand here. Probably I love thinning those extra lands out of the deck. And then do I want food or more blockers? I think I want more blockers. Can never have too many swamps. Alright, and we still have a black up in case we need yet another not dead. Alright, so that Faithbound Judge is now sitting in the graveyard. It can come back with Disturb, but they need 7 mana for that, and they don't have it yet. So I'm still mostly just worried about exile-based removal. If they don't have answers for our big stuff, we're just going to keep attacking, and next turn I'm even going to animate one of these cottages to eat this Faithbound Judge before they get to play it. That is, if our opponent ever takes their turn and lets us have another shot at things. A little hydration break here, I guess. Alright, opponent has settled on a Ruins Recluse, a spider that they can spend 4 mana to put a 1/1 counter on. I mean, that'd be a pretty good use of their turn. It would trigger the Trumpeter and the Brawler, and it gives them a creature with Death Touch, which would be great against somebody who's not holding Not Dead after all. But instead they use Fertilid's Favor. Target player searches their library for a basic land, puts it onto the field, tap, shuffles, put 2 1/1 counters, and they just keep throwing counters on the Brawler. I guess I don't understand why they do that. Like, if they put them on the Root Weaver, then the Brawler would also get a counter, right? Alright, well. I mean, this is only a 3/3, and they are tapped out, so I think we get to eat that. And this is a 2/2. Do I trade it? Do that, and I'm okay just taking 6. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, they've got a 1/1 with Death Touch. I think they realize there's no way they're going to survive this attack, and they concede. So that's 2 wins for Gruff and Tuff. Not bad for a budget 3-color deck built around a fairy tale. Let's put the list up on screen one more time and do some closing thoughts. Alright, Gruff and Tuff did pretty well for being a budget 3-color deck. Really, we only stumbled against those fairies in game 1, and that could have gone, in our favor if we'd maybe drawn a little better than we did. But ultimately, I'm pretty happy with how this one played out. Coming up with upgrades, kind of a challenge. Maybe Bushwhack. I mean, it lets us search for a basic land and put it into our hand, but it's also another fight spell. Maybe that's a little better than some of these expensive Graceful Takedowns. But I don't know. I mean, I like that this is a one-sided fight, or a bite, as it's often called. But you get a little more flexibility out of the Bushwhack, so that's something to consider. Another thing maybe to look for would be like just negate or a hard counterspell of some sort. We've got Spellscorn Coven in here, which feels kind of weird. It has like a soft counterspell in it, and then it's a 4-mana 2/3 flyer that makes our opponent discard a card. So the idea is that you make them take it back and then play this to make them discard whatever they just brought back to hand. Very situational, kind of expensive, doesn't work great with our fights or anything else. So I'm not really sure why this is in here, but if we like having a way to protect our big creatures, just some negates or some hard counters there for board wipes or targeted removal might be worth putting in. And then the last thing I would look at, we've got tons of extra mana, maybe Thunderous Debut, bargaining some of those food tokens that we got from Return from the Wilds perhaps, might let us put Gruff Triplets right into play, or Beanstalk Worm, or Troll, something like that. I would also consider upping the number of Trolls. I mean, it's a good card. We just didn't see it during our gameplay here, but I like it. It's a 4-mana 5/5 with Trample, really, that can shrink itself just a little to fight somebody, which seems pretty good. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this one overall. A few upgrades you could make, but for being a budget 3-color deck made only out of cards from one set in Standard, it did all right. I'd love to hear what you think about it down in the comments, so pop on down there and say hi. Then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya.